I decide who rolls here. Gender.
And my brother decides your fate.
She fired before I could even shout her name. One sharp crack, then another, ripping through the quiet morning like someone snapping the bones of the world. By the time I spun around, Rachel's wheelchair lurched sideways, one tire hissing, the rubber sagging as air bled out beneath her. And standing at the edge of my driveway, chin lifted, eyes blazing, was Vivian Markham, holding that silver pellet gun like she was delivering justice instead of hate. "You can't park medical equipment on community pavement," the board chair said, her voice steady, almost proud. "This is your warning." I didn't move, I didn't breathe. I just stared at the sagging tire beneath my wife, who already spent every day fighting to stay mobile, while the enforcer in crimson holstered her weapon like she'd merely clipped a weed. "You made a mistake," I said, my voice low. She smirked. "No, I enforced a rule." And that's when I dropped it, the truth she didn't expect, the only thing capable of slicing through her arrogance. "I engineered that wheelchair myself," I said. "Every bolt, every pressure valve, every calibration." I stepped closer, letting her see the steadiness in my eyes. "And I can prove those shots weren't an accident." Her confidence flickered. Not much, but enough. If you've ever felt that electric rush of standing your ground against a bully, don't look away now and hit the subscribe button now. She tilted her head. "You think you're special because you can tinker with machines? I think you underestimate what I can do," I said, professionally, legally, and personally. That was the contrarian snapback, the shift from her imagined power to the quiet, rooted strength she didn't know she'd provoked. Because she didn't just deflate a tire, she struck the one object that held Rachel upright in a world determined to knock her down. And Rachel? God. She sat frozen, gripping the armrest, her breath shaking as the chair dipped unevenly. I crouched beside her, checking her leg brace first, then the axle, then the ruined rubber. I still remembered the night I built the original design, Rachel watching from the couch, her smile small but real for the first time since the accident. That chair wasn't gear, it wasn't convenience, it was freedom, it was dignity carved into steel. Vivian attacked that, attacked her, and it mattered more than any HOA rule ever written. "Where are you watching from?" I asked quietly, because moments like these reveal something universal, how quickly a quiet neighborhood can turn hostile, how one person's cruelty can change the rhythm of a street, a home, a marriage. The clipboard queen crossed her arms now, shifting weight onto one heel like she owned the entire block. "You've been warned before," she said. "Your wife's condition doesn't exempt you from standards." I rose slowly, meeting her gaze with a calm that wasn't calm at all. "Her name is Rachel, and that's not a condition. That's a woman you just endangered." That chair was blocking the walkway, the officer of rules insisted, eyes narrowing. "I acted for community safety." "No," I said. "You acted because control feels good to you." A few neighbors paused mid-stride, drawn by the tension. One woman's jaw dropped when she saw the popped tires. A man set down his garbage can and whispered, "Did she really just shoot those?" Vivian stiffened, suddenly aware she wasn't alone anymore. "You're exaggerating," she snapped. "Am I?" I asked. "Because the pressure fracture on that rim, the pellet impact points, the double puncture pattern, all of that says intentional." Her face twitched, and that was when fate added the final spark. A black SUV rolled slowly up the street, familiar engine hum vibrating through the pavement. The tinted window lowered just an inch, enough for me to see the silhouette inside. My brother, my Navy SEAL brother. Vivian didn't know she'd just stepped into a storm. She wasn't built to survive. The SUV door swung open, and Mason stepped out with that unmistakable stillness, shoulders squared, jaw locked, eyes scanning the situation like a battlefield he'd already mapped in his head. Vivian Markham shifted immediately, the false confidence she'd wrapped herself in suddenly thinning like cheap fabric. She wasn't scared yet, but she felt something. Disruption. Loss of control. "Morning," Mason said, voice low and steady as he walked toward us. The board chair forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "This is a private HOA matter, residents only." He stopped inches from her, polite but immovable. "My family lives here." Her jaw tightened. "Well, Your brother's wife violated. He lifted a hand slowly, not aggressive, just enough to interrupt her. I can see exactly who violated what. Color drained from her cheeks. Rachel winced as I adjusted the tilted wheelchair, checking the second tire. The rubber was shredded. The pellet holes were clean and intentional. Mason's gaze followed my movements, then flicked back to the enforcer in crimson with a stare that could pin steel to concrete. What kind of person fires at a disabled woman's wheelchair? He asked. She scoffed. It was corrective action. Corrective? I murmured. She nearly tipped Rachel over. Vivian's nostrils flared. Your wife needs to store mobility devices inside. They're eyesores. Mason took one step forward. She took one back. Say that again, he said quietly. Neighbors began gathering at the edges of their driveways, their morning routine stalled by the growing tension. A couple walking their dog stopped in the street, the man whispering, "Is she serious?" The woman shook her head, eyes wide. Vivian straightened her spine, clinging to the remains of her authority. We have rules, and your brother has refused to comply. This, she gestured at the damaged chair, could have been avoided. The clipboard queen tried to sound firm, but her voice cracked at the edges. I lifted Rachel carefully from the sagging seat and set her against the hood of our car, supporting her weight. The cold metal pressed under my palm. She gripped my arm, breath uneven but steady, eyes locked on Vivian with a mixture of hurt and disbelief. I wasn't blocking anyone, Rachel said softly. You know I wasn't. Vivian looked away quickly, too quickly. I turned to Mason. We need to get photographic documentation. ADA inspectors won't take verbal complaints alone. Not for vandalism like this. His eyebrow arched. Already on it. He raised his phone and started capturing angles like a trained investigator. Close-ups, trajectory alignment, pellet entry points, and the distance from where the tyrant in heels had stood. Vivian snapped, "You can't record HOA enforcement procedure." It wasn't procedure, Mason said. It was an attack. The tension thickened. A few neighbors stepped closer, drawn by the shifting power dynamic. One man muttered, "She's gone too far this time." Another whispered, "Someone should have stopped her years ago." Vivian whipped around to glare at them, but no one dropped their gaze. She wasn't used to that. She wasn't used to being seen. "Everyone back to your homes," she barked. "Now." No one moved. The officer of rules trembled, not visibly, but in the slight shake of her fingers as she clutched her violation clipboard like it could shield her. She scribbled something furiously, then tore the slip off and thrust it toward me. I didn't take it. "What's this?" I asked. "A formal citation for hazardous obstruction," she snapped. 3 violations and a quarter equals fines." "You shot the tires," I said. "You caused the obstruction." "That's your opinion." "No," Mason said, lifting the chair slightly. "That's physics." Vivian flinched as if the word itself had weight. A car turned the corner, Detective Lauren Pierce's cruiser. She slowed as she passed, eyes narrowing at the scene. Rachel gripping the car, shattered tires, neighbors standing in silent judgment, and Vivian frozen with a clipboard halfway between us. She parked 2 houses down. Vivian swallowed hard. She had no idea that this morning was the beginning of her unraveling, and for the first time, the neighborhood seemed to sense it. Detective Lauren Pierce stepped out of her cruiser with the kind of calm authority that made the sidewalk feel smaller. Vivian Markham stiffened instantly, spine straight. Clipboard tucked behind her like a guilty child hiding a broken vase. The board chair attempted a strained smile, but her eyes jittered with something close to panic. Lauren approached slowly, scanning the damaged chair, Rachel leaning against the car, Mason's squared stance, and the cluster of neighbors drawn like gravity to the scene. "What happened here?" she asked. Vivian jumped in too quickly. "A resident-created obstruction, handled through HOA procedures." Lauren raised a brow. "Handled? This looks like a shooting." "It was corrective action," the enforcer in crimson insisted, voice brittle. "A pellet gun to prevent—" "A pellet gun?" Lauren repeated sharply. "On mobility equipment?" Vivian's throat bobbed. Before she could speak again, a figure hesitated at the corner of the sidewalk. Caleb Morton, the HOA maintenance officer. Shoulders hunched, posture tense. A man pulled between fear and conscience. He hovered near a flower bed like he wanted to blend into the shrubs themselves. Lauren noticed. You, she said. Step closer. Caleb flinched. His gaze flicked to Vivian, the kind of glance that begged for permission, or maybe forgiveness. The clipboard queen narrowed her eyes in warning. It was subtle, but sharp enough to cut. Caleb swallowed, boots scraping softly as he shuffled forward, hands tucked into his pockets, shoulders curved inward. His eyes stayed low, staring at the cracked pavement instead of the people around him. Did you see what happened? Lauren asked. His jaw tightened, his fingers twitched. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, body language screaming conflict even before a word left his lips. I heard something, he murmured. Vivian cut in fast. He wasn't here. He's confused. Lauren didn't look away from Caleb. What did you hear? He hesitated, stealing another fearful glance at the tyrant in heels. She was shaking her head slowly, eyes blazing a silent command. Don't you dare! Caleb's breath stuttered. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Hands trembled at his sides now, knuckles whitening. I heard 2 pops, he whispered finally. Like pellet shots. Lauren nodded. And from where? Caleb's eyes flicked again toward Vivian, who stepped closer to him, almost shielding his view of the scene. He wasn't in position to confirm, she started, but Caleb stepped back, out of her shadow, out of her reach, out of her control, and that tiny step said more than anything he could have spoken. He pointed to the exact spot Vivian had stood earlier. There. Rachel's breath caught softly. Mason's jaw clenched. My fists tightened at my sides. Vivian's reaction was instant, an eruption barely contained. Caleb, you misunderstood the situation. Those were warning shots. I didn't— Warning shots? Lauren demanded. At a disabled woman? Neighbors murmured louder now, a ripple of shock, disgust, recognition. Caleb stepped back again, eyes darting between the group and the sidewalk, anxiety written into each nervous movement. His shoulders lifted and dropped rapidly with shallow breaths. He wanted to disappear, but he couldn't. Not anymore. Not with a police officer watching him like he was the hinge of the whole moment. Vivian reached for his arm. He recoiled. The officer of rules froze mid-motion, stunned by the sudden rejection. She pressured me, Caleb said quickly under his breath, voice cracking. She said we needed to— Enough, Vivian snapped, voice sharp as broken glass. You're done talking. But Caleb didn't stop. He wiped sweat from his palms, shaking his head as if trying to knock loose the courage buried deep inside him. Lauren stepped between them. He'll answer my questions, not yours. Vivian's lips parted, outrage trembling through her entire stance. Caleb looked at me, really looked, for the first time since the shooting. His eyes were filled with guilt, and something new carrying weight. Regret. I didn't want any trouble, he whispered. I told her the wheelchair wasn't blocking anything. I told her the rules didn't apply that way. But she said if I didn't back her up, I'd lose my job. The neighborhood fell silent. Even the breeze seemed to pause. Vivian lunged toward him with a hissed, Caleb! But Mason stepped forward, one hand raised, not touching, not threatening, just enough pressure in the air to freeze her where she stood. Caleb exhaled shakily. He had crossed a line, and there was no turning back now. Vivian Markham didn't retreat. She regrouped. The moment Caleb's trembling confession settled into the air, the board chair snapped her clipboard shut and spun on her heel, marching toward the HOA office at the end of the block. Her posture was a storm cloud, rigid, charging, furious. People stepped aside without her asking. She didn't look at Rachel. She didn't look at me. She didn't even look at Mason. She just moved with a single obsessive purpose: regain control before the truth consumed her. Lauren turned to me. I'll file an incident report, but the HOA board will likely try to spin this. Keep documentation, all of it. We will, I said. Rachel squeezed my arm again, leaning into me. Her voice was soft but steady. She won't stop. No, Mason said flatly. She won't. But stopping her wasn't the question anymore. How far she was willing to go. That's what worried me. A few minutes later, with the neighborhood still buzzing, Lauren cleared the area and told us to return home while she contacted the city's ADA compliance unit. Mason loaded the damaged wheelchair into the SUV, lifting it as though it weighed nothing. The bent rim scraped softly against the bumper. We hadn't even pulled into our driveway when my phone buzzed with a notification from the neighborhood app. Urgent HOA notice. Mandatory safety inspection for all mobility devices. Immediate compliance required. Mason read it over my shoulder. She's moving fast. She always does, I muttered. But this wasn't speed. This was retaliation. Inside the house, I settled Rachel onto the couch and placed a pillow under her legs. She winced as her brace shifted. Mason stood near the window, watching the street like a soldier monitoring hostile terrain. Across the cul-de-sac, the enforcer in crimson reappeared, clipboard tucked under her arm, phone pressed to her ear, pacing in sharp, angry strides. Her free hand sliced through the air as she spoke, punctuating every sentence as if she were giving orders in a war room. "She's calling the board," I said. "She's calling anyone who'll listen," Mason replied. "That's what people like her do when cornered." I knew he was right. Vivian Markham didn't crumble. She retaliated, and she weaponized rules, not truth, to regain the upper hand. As if on cue, a second notification pinged across neighbors' phones. HOA alert. Roland residents faces review for non-compliance with medical equipment placement. Board meeting tonight. Attendance required. Rachel's expression fell. "She's doing this on purpose. She's trying to humiliate us." "She's trying to erase what happened," I said. "Before the inspector arrives." Mason's jaw locked tighter. "She's scared." I turned to him. "Scared people are dangerous." He didn't argue. We spent most of the afternoon preparing Rachel's temporary wheelchair, the backup chair I kept in the garage, not evidence, just equipment, and checking the street every few minutes. Cars passed, neighbors whispered. Word of the shooting spread faster than Vivian could contain it, and her frantic pacing outside only made it worse. Around 4 o'clock, a shadow appeared at our door. Not Lauren, not a neighbor, Caleb. He stood there, shoulders slumped, sweat beading at his temples. His eyes kept darting back toward the HOA office like he expected Vivian to materialize behind him. "I shouldn't be here," he said quietly, "but she's planning something for tonight." Rachel stiffened. I stepped closer. "What kind of something?" Caleb wrung his hands, knuckles whitening. "She's rewriting the minutes from this morning. She's saying the chair was already damaged when she arrived." Mason scoffed. "She's rewriting reality." Caleb shook his head. "She's also claiming you verbally threatened her." Rachel's breath hitched. "You didn't even raise your voice." "I know that," Caleb whispered, voice fraying. "But she's desperate, and when she gets desperate, she escalates," I said. He nodded, his shoulders curled inward again, body shrinking under the weight of guilt. "I didn't stop her. I should have tried. I'm sorry." The apology hung in the air, fragile but honest. Before I could respond, another blast notification lit our phones. HOA board meeting, location, community recreation. Center time, 6:00 p.m. Agenda, compliance violations, resident misconduct, rule enforcement. Mason read it aloud, a slow exhale following. "She's calling a public trial." Rachel looked at me, fear mixing with exhaustion. "We have to go, don't we?" "We do." I brushed her hand gently. "And she's not expecting what comes next." Mason leaned forward, voice lowering. "Tonight, she'll overplay her hand." I nodded, because tonight wasn't just a meeting. It was the first crack in her empire. The community recreation center looked harmless from the outside. Soft blue trim, white columns, a row of neatly trimmed hedges. But as we approached, the air around it felt charged, almost metallic, like static clinging to skin before a storm. Rachel rested in the backup wheelchair, her fingers tapping anxiously against the armrest. Mason pushed her slowly, eyes sweeping the parking lot with the same silent precision he used clearing hostile zones overseas. People trickled toward the entrance in clusters, some curious, some angry, some whispering behind cupped hands. But every single one of them kept glancing toward the far corner of the lot, where Vivian Markham stood under the shade of an oak tree, clipboard clutched tight, jaw locked, posture defiant. The board chair didn't greet anyone, didn't soften, didn't hide. She watched each person like she was counting enemies instead of neighbors. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered faintly overhead. Rows of folding chairs formed a crude semicircle facing a long table draped in an HOA banner. It wasn't a meeting. It was a stage, and she planned to use it. I rolled Rachel forward while Mason maneuvered behind us, guarding every angle without looking like he was guarding anything. A couple across the aisle gave us sympathetic nods. Another man muttered, "She shouldn't get away with this." Before the meeting began, I stepped toward the side hallway where the offices were. I needed a moment, not to calm down, I was far past calm, but to focus. The next steps had to be deliberate. A door opened quietly behind me. "Mr. Rowland?" I turned. A woman with a city badge stood there, mid-40s, steady eyes, clipboard not used as a weapon, but a tool. City ADA Inspector Carla Reyes. Perfect. "I received a call from Detective Pierce this morning," she said, "about damage to a mobility device." My pulse kicked. "You came fast," she nodded. "ADA violations require immediate investigation. Can you show me the chair?" I led her back to Mason, who had already lifted the damaged wheelchair from the SUV and set it beside the recreation center wall. The metal rim glinted under the afternoon light, 2 clean puncture holes visible in the rubber. Reyes crouched, examining angle, depth, entry trajectory. Her expression shifted from neutral to sharpened concern. "This wasn't an accident," she said. "Someone intentionally discharged a projectile into both tires." Behind us, footsteps faltered. I turned. The enforcer in. Crimson watched us from the doorway, knuckles white, eyes darkening as the inspector continued her assessment. Vivian stepped closer, heels clacking loudly, too fast. "That chair was illegally blocking a walkway," she declared, voice brittle. "My actions were safety enforcement." Reyes stood slowly. "By shooting at it?" Vivian blinked, twice. "I acted according to Section 14C of the HOA manual," the clipboard queen insisted. "Residents must keep—" "HOA manuals," Reyes cut in, "do not override federal ADA law." A murmur floated from surrounding neighbors who had wandered closer. Vivian's eyes darted around, searching for backup, finding none. Reyes dusted her hands and continued documenting the damages. I watched her methods carefully, precise measurements, photos from 3 angles, pressure indentation notes. She wasn't improvising. She was building a case, a federal-grade one. While she worked, I noticed Caleb in the corner of the room, hovering near the punch table, shoulders stiff, feet shifting, eyes never leaving Vivian. He looked like a man standing on a trap door, terrified of when it would open. When Reyes finished, she turned toward me. "Mr. Rowland, this qualifies as potential discriminatory vandalism under ADA Title III. I'll file an expedited report. Expect a formal statement request within 48 hours. Vivian gasped quietly. "You can't do that." Reyes faced her. "I can, and I will." The tyrant in heels recoiled like she'd been slapped. "And before tonight's meeting starts," Reyes added, "don't attempt to present fabricated safety allegations. It won't end well." Vivian's breath hitched. She spun around, storming toward the front table with frantic steps. Rachel whispered, "She's losing it." "No," Mason murmured. "She's realizing what she messed with." I looked at Reyes. "Thank you for coming," she nodded once. "We take accessibility very seriously." Her presence wasn't just comforting. It was the first concrete shift in power. The first piece of outside authority stepping into the battlefield Vivian thought she controlled. As people filled the seats, the hum of whispered judgment grew. Eyes narrowed, heads shook. The room was already turning against her before she even opened her mouth. The meeting hadn't started yet, and the officer of rules was already drowning. The HOA meeting hadn't even started, yet the rec center buzzed like a pressure chamber ready to blow. People kept glancing back at the damaged wheelchair propped against the wall, whispers turning into quiet outrage. But before anyone could sit, an announcement blared over the speakers. "Overflow crowd. Additional seating is available in the back courtyard." Perfect. Another location. Another chance to watch the board unravel. Rachel tapped my arm, wanting fresh air. So Mason pushed her toward the courtyard exit. I followed, noticing how the shift in environment changed everything. Cooler air, long shadows stretching across the pavers, string lights flickering beneath the dusk sky. A fountain, our community's supposed symbol of unity, sat in the center, its churning water sounding more like grinding teeth tonight. A cluster of neighbors whispered near the benches, but one figure stood out, pacing in tight circles behind a planter. The HOA treasurer, Caleb, shoulders hunched, arms locked, fingers squeezing the edge of his phone like it might snap. The moment he saw us, he froze. I stepped closer, recognizing that same internal tug-of-war I'd seen earlier in the rec center. Guilt, fear, and something else. Anticipation, maybe. Or dread. Before I could speak, the door behind us slammed open. Vivian Markham burst into the courtyard with a fury that vibrated through the concrete, arms stiff, eyes sharp, face twisted into a controlled, brittle smile that betrayed the panic simmering underneath. The board chair walked straight toward Caleb. "Inside! Now!" she hissed. Her voice carried across the courtyard, earning a few raised eyebrows. Caleb didn't move, his jaw clenched, his feet planted like roots. "I said now," she repeated louder. Caleb swallowed. "I'm staying here for a minute." The enforcer in crimson turned her glare on me as if she could burn through skin. "This circus you're creating ends tonight," she snapped. "And if you think some inspector's little visit is going to save you..." I stopped her with a single sentence. "Vivian, she filed already, before you even walked out of that room." Her expression cracked, a hairline fracture, quick but visible. The clipboard queen stepped closer, heels grinding against the pavers. "We run this neighborhood, not the city, not outsiders, certainly not you." "Someone should tell the federal government that," Mason said from behind us, voice calm and dangerous. Vivian stiffened. She hadn't realized he'd followed us out. The tyrant in heels regained her composure quickly, but her breathing had changed. Faster, shallow, the way a person breathes when they start losing the argument they plan to dominate. A group of neighbors drifted closer, pretending to admire the fountain, but clearly eavesdropping. The courtyard began to feel like a quiet amphitheater. Vivian noticed. She lowered her voice, sharp as a blade. "If you keep pushing this, Daniel, I'll bury you under so many HOA violations you won't have time to breathe." "Try," I said, "but make sure you understand what ADA retaliation carries in federal penalties." The officer of rules blinked, realizing the threat wasn't empty, and that's when the discovery hit, not from something said, but something seen. Caleb stepped back, lifting his phone just enough for me to notice the screen, not the content, the sender, City ADA Legal Division. The realization punched me like cold wind. He wasn't avoiding Vivian, he'd been texting the inspector. While she raged about controlling the neighborhood, he was already reaching out to the authorities she feared most. Caleb caught my eye, brief, panicked, and apologetic. He looked like a man about to implode under the weight of his own conscience. Vivian spun toward him again. "I told you not to." He backed up fast. "I didn't say anything, okay? I'm just trying to work." Liar, but a useful liar. Vivian grabbed his arm, nails digging through fabric. "If anyone sees our internal logs..." Internal logs. My heartbeat thudded once, hard. That was it. That was the slip. The unintentional crack that revealed more than she intended. Something she shouldn't have referenced in public. Something she needed buried. I leaned in. "What logs, Vivian?" She froze. The courtyard went silent. Even the fountain seemed to still. For the first time tonight, genuine fear dug into her features. She released Caleb slowly. Too slowly. Then she turned and strode back inside without another word. Mason stepped beside me. "Looks like she's hiding something big." "No," I said, pulse igniting. "She's hiding something she's terrified the ADA will uncover." The stakes weren't just personal anymore. They were systemic, and she knew it. Caleb didn't follow Vivian back inside. He stood frozen in the courtyard long after the tyrant in heels vanished through the double doors, his hands trembling slightly at his sides. The glow from the fountain lights made his face look even paler, like guilt itself was washing him hollow. Mason watched him with narrowed eyes, calculating, protective, while Rachel shifted uneasily in her chair. I stepped toward him slowly, not wanting him to bolt. "Caleb, whatever she's hiding, you're already caught in it, aren't you?" He blinked fast, like the words pierced something raw. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then he whispered, "We need to talk, but not here." His gaze flicked toward the meeting hall, where the board chair had disappeared. Fear, pure fear, the kind that comes from being trapped too long under someone else's thumb. Mason rolled Rachel's chair behind us as we followed Caleb across the courtyard, past the fountain, toward a dimly lit side hallway that led to the equipment storage patio, a space used for folding tables during events. It wasn't a garage or basement. It was open air, half-lit, barely private, but safe enough. He exhaled sharply once the doors shut behind us. "I shouldn't be doing this," he muttered, dragging a hand through his hair. "Vivian will destroy me if she finds out." "That's because the enforcer in Crimson destroys anyone who threatens her control," I said. "But you reached out to the ADA inspector. That's not a small step." He flinched. Not denial, confirmation. "She crossed the line," he whispered. "Tonight wasn't even the worst of it." Rachel's breath hitched. Mason moved closer to her instinctively. Caleb leaned back against the railing, eyes darting, mind racing. The internal war inside him was visible in every jitter of his hands, every shaky exhale. Part of him still feared Vivian with the blind obedience of someone long manipulated. The other part, the part staring at Rachel's damaged wheelchair, was fighting to break free. Finally, he looked at me. Really looked. "She ordered it," he said. "Vivian told a board member to slash the tires last month. When that didn't teach you a lesson, she escalated." My stomach dropped. The clipboard queen, calculating, meticulous, had orchestrated every attack, every threat. And now, we had confirmation from the one person she couldn't afford to lose. "Why are you telling us now?" I asked quietly. His voice cracked. "Because I thought this was just HOA stuff, strict rules, stupid fines. But the second she fired a weapon near your wife," he shook his head hard, "I realize she's dangerous in ways we can't hide anymore." Mason's jaw tightened. "You should have realized that sooner." Caleb didn't argue. He swallowed, bracing himself. "There's more. Stuff the ADA inspector doesn't even know yet." My pulse picked up. "Tell me." He hesitated again, fear tightening his throat. Then he stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "She made us alter records." The words hit like a hammer. "What records?" I asked. He squeezed his eyes shut, shoulders collapsing. "Incident reports, complaint logs, traffic camera timestamps, anything that would make her look negligent or abusive. She had us rewrite it." My skin went cold. "So the internal logs she mentioned are real," he said, "and they'll bury her if the right people see them." The officer of rules had built her entire reign on falsified documents, and now her own treasurer was unraveling it. Rachel covered her mouth. "Caleb, that could ruin you." His laugh was broken. "I'm already ruined if I stay silent." For the first time, he looked determined, not scared. "What do you need from me?" I asked. His answer came fast. "I'll get you the truth, not the documents. We keep those locked digitally behind our office firewall. But I can show you where the discrepancies are, what to request, who to subpoena. If the inspector sees the pattern, she'll call in federal review." This was the breakthrough. Clean, lawful, strategic, and devastating. Caleb wiped his palms on his slacks. "But you need to move before she wipes everything tonight." Vivian panicked in there. She knows she slipped. Mason nodded slowly. "Then we move now." Caleb straightened, resolve sharpening. "I'm in. Whatever it costs me." As we left the patio, a gust of wind tore through the courtyard, carrying the faint sound of Vivian's voice echoing inside. Sharp, frantic, losing control. And for the first time, she should be afraid. Caleb walked a few steps ahead of us as we crossed the courtyard again, shoulders stiff, posture braced like he expected Vivian Markham to explode through a doorway at any moment. The air felt heavier now, thicker with the weight of what he'd revealed. The fountain behind us gurgled a little louder, like it sensed the shift too. "We can't talk in there," Caleb murmured. "Too many ears. Too many cameras she controls." Cameras. Of course the clipboard queen would monitor everything she could get her hands on. Rachel nodded toward the far end of the property. "The garden path is empty," she whispered. The community's meditation garden, tucked behind a winding hedge corridor, lit by soft lanterns, was usually a place for quiet reflection. Tonight, it became the perfect battlefield for planning our counterstrike. As soon as we entered the garden, the noise of the rec center faded. The air cooled. The lanterns flickered shadows across the stone walkway, turning the whole area into a whispering sanctuary. "This is good," Caleb said, glancing around. No cameras. She hates this place since residents voted for it unanimously without her input. That alone was enough to make the tyrant in heels despise it. Rachel rested her hands anxiously on her lap as Mason positioned her wheelchair beside a bench. "Caleb," she asked softly, "how long have you been hiding all of this?" He sat across from us, elbows braced on his knees. "Too long. She pulled me into her mess years ago. At first I thought it was just harmless revisions, cleaning up sloppy reports. Then she started rewriting incidents to protect herself. And then your situation happened." I leaned forward. "Tell me about the firewall. If the ADA inspector requests the logs, can she still bury them?" He shook his head. "The officer of rules thinks she can, but the city system stores every access attempt. If she deletes anything, or even tries, they'll see." "Good," Mason said. "So all we need is the request to go through before she reacts." Caleb exhaled. "I already pointed the inspector in the right direction, but she'll need specifics, patterns, exact dates, times of discrepancies. And you can give us those?" He nodded slowly. "I can't take documents, but I can tell you where the bodies are buried, figuratively." He glanced around again nervously. "She's been doctoring timestamps on resident complaints for years. Half the fines she issued weren't even backed by real reports." My jaw clenched. "And she targeted Rachel because she wanted to make an example out of us." Caleb swallowed hard. "Worse, she targeted Rachel because she hates the idea of anyone needing accommodations. She thinks ADA rules make the board weak." Her words. The enforcer in crimson, anti-accommodation, anti-fairness, anti-humanity. None of this surprised me anymore, but hearing it laid bare by one of her own shook something deep inside me. Rachel wiped a tear. "She really sees me as, what, a threat?" "A reminder she can't control everything," Caleb whispered, "and she hates that." Mason's voice cut through the garden like a blade. "So what's her next move?" Caleb hesitated, eyes drifting to the stone lantern beside him. "She'll try to preempt the inspector, maybe call an emergency board vote to secure HOA systems under the guise of cybersecurity. That means locking down evidence," I said. "Exactly." A lantern flickered sharply, casting a brief flash across the garden, almost like a warning. I checked my watch. "The inspector said she'd review files tonight?" Caleb nodded. "Around 9? Rachel inhaled slowly. "Then we need to stay steps ahead of the board chair." Mason cracked his knuckles. "We can do more than stay ahead. We can corner her." Caleb looked up at us, fear, hope, and exhaustion all swirling together. "If you're really doing this, then you'll need allies, people she's hurt, neighbors she intimidated. People who'll speak up once they know they're not alone," Rachel said. Exactly. The meditation garden suddenly felt less like a sanctuary, and more like the birthplace of a rebellion. "Let me help you gather them," Caleb said. "She thinks she's untouchable. She thinks the neighborhood fears her, but they've never seen someone stand up to her and win." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "They will now?" He nodded, trembling but resolute. "Then I'll start tonight." Quietly, before she notices. We stood to leave when the garden gate creaked open. A shadow stepped inside. Not Vivian, but someone she'd sent, watching, listening, and then slipping away as fast as they had appeared. Mason cursed under his breath. "She knows something's shifting." Good, because the shift was only just beginning. The moment that shadow slipped out of the meditation garden, we knew we had to move. No more slow steps, no more cautious exchanges. If the board chair had eyes on us tonight, every second mattered. "We split up," Mason said as we stepped back into the courtyard. "Caleb gathers neighbors, you gather timestamps. I'll keep eyes on Rachel." Caleb nodded, swallowing the fear that still lingered on his face. "Meet at the community tech lounge in 20 minutes. It's the only place she never checks. She thinks it's boring." Of course, the clipboard queen would ignore anything she didn't personally understand. We headed there through the side path, weaving between hedges and lampposts. Night had fallen, and the neighborhood looked eerily calm, too calm for what was brewing beneath the surface. The tech lounge sat near the tennis courts, lit by the soft glow of neon blue LED strips along the ceiling and the hum of old desktop towers. When we entered, it was empty. Good. The room felt strangely cold, humming with untapped potential. The perfect place. To build the trap she would never see coming. Mason positioned Rachel near the central table, and the moment her chair settled, I pulled out my laptop and connected to the public HOA Wi-Fi. Not to hack anything, just to pull up every publicly available timestamp and complaint record I could find. I can cross-check the ones she didn't alter, I said, scanning the list. Anything here that doesn't match what Caleb told us? That's our leverage. Rachel leaned forward. Do we have any from the day she shot my tires? A chill crept down my spine. Let's find out. While the page loaded, the door opened and Caleb stepped in, breathless, clutching a folded note. Behind him trailed 3 neighbors from different pockets of the subdivision. Faces I recognized, faces I'd never seen, looked this angry. She's heard all of us, one woman whispered fiercely. We've been waiting for someone to finally push back. Caleb motioned them inside. These are just the first. More are coming. The officer of rules had underestimated the entire neighborhood. What's the note? I asked. Caleb stepped closer, lowering his voice. She called an emergency closed-door session. Right now, she's prepping the board to authorize a full digital lockdown. Rachel's eyes widened. She's trying to erase everything. Exactly, Caleb said. And we've got, he checked his watch, maybe 15 minutes before she hits the system. Mason cracked his neck. Then we work faster. I turned back to the screen just as the complaint list fully loaded. The first thing that caught my eye was a pattern Caleb mentioned. Several entries time-stamped at hours when he swore no one filed anything. 3:14 a.m., 4:02 a.m., 2:58 a.m., too clean, too precise, too engineered. The enforcer in crimson had made mistakes. Look at this, I murmured. Complaint against Rachel. Filed the same night she was in the ER for her pressure sore treatment. Rachel inhaled sharply. She knew I wasn't even home. And filed it anyway, I said. That's ADA retaliation. Caleb gestured urgently to another block of entries. Check those. Those are the ones she made me rewrite. I clicked the first, and then I saw it. A maintenance request marked resolved. Same timestamp as a noise complaint. Same timestamp as a parking violation. Impossible. She duplicated timestamps, I whispered, to cover her tracks. Caleb nodded, shame clouding his expression. She forced me to copy-paste them, said no one would notice. Well, someone had noticed, and someone was documenting every discrepancy. This is enough to prompt escalation, I said. The city inspector won't be able to ignore this. But before relief could settle, a knock hit the lounge door. Fast, sharp, panicked. Mason stood first, stepping between Rachel and the entrance. Caleb went pale. I think she knows I'm gone, he whispered. I opened the door a crack, only to find another neighbor, Mr. Alden, breathing hard. She's locking the building, he said. The tyrant in heels just ordered the security guard to restrict access. She's trying to corner the inspector before they see anything. My pulse spiked. We need to get this data to the ADA before she shuts down the network. Rachel pointed toward the tennis court gate outside. There's hardwired city Wi-Fi there. It bypasses HOA controls. Perfect. We grabbed the laptop, mobilized the neighbors, and rushed toward the exit. Behind us, through the window, I saw Vivian Markham entering the main hall, chin raised, confidence cracking, desperation creeping in. She knew the walls were closing in, and tonight, we were the ones closing them. The night air hit us like a cold slap as we sprinted toward the tennis court gate. The hardwired city Wi-Fi node glowed faintly above the chain-link fence, its blue indicator light blinking steadily, still active, still untouched by the HOA's lockdown. We upload here, I said, gripping the laptop under my arm. If the inspector gets this before she seals the system, she can trigger emergency protocol. Mason scanned the shadows around us. Move fast. If the board chair figures out we bailed, she'll send someone. The group of neighbors Caleb gathered followed closely behind, sticking near Rachel as she rolled across the concrete with determined focus. The tennis courts looked abandoned, nets still up, sideline lights casting long rectangles of sterile white across the asphalt. Too bright to hide in, too exposed, but perfect for what we needed to finish. Caleb reached the fence first. This spot's safe. She can't override city signals. I opened the laptop, knees sinking into the cold court surface. The cursor blinked against a dark screen as I connected to the municipal network, secure, encrypted, shielded from anything the clipboard queen controlled. "Come on," I muttered, tapping through menus, accessing the discrepancy logs we'd collected. Rachel leaned forward. "Are you sending everything? All timestamps, all conflict overlays, mismatched entries, everything Caleb flagged." I glanced at him. "You ready?" He exhaled shakily. "I've been ready since she shot those tires." I clicked send. The screen flashed. Uploading, uploading, uploading. Mason paced the sideline, jaw tight. "She's going to throw a fit when she realizes Ada's servers pinged her logs." "She'll do more than throw a fit," another neighbor whispered. "She'll try to frame all of us." Rachel nodded grimly. "Let her try." Halfway through the upload, a shout echoed from the path behind us. "Hey, you can't be back here!" We all whipped around. The HOA's contracted security guard, a man who normally looked bored to death at the front gate, stormed toward us with sudden urgency. His radio crackled on. His shoulder. "She told him," Caleb whispered. "She told him we were interfering." The enforcer in crimson must have realized we slipped the lockdown. The guard planted himself between us and the path. "Board orders. Everyone inside for emergency announcement. Now." Mason stepped forward. "We're not leaving." "You don't get a choice," the guard snapped, reaching for the radio again. But Caleb moved faster. "No. Wait, listen," he said, raising both hands. "They aren't breaking any rules. They're using city Wi-Fi. That's outside HOA jurisdiction." The guard hesitated, unsure. She says a lot of things," Caleb interrupted, voice trembling but defiant. "Doesn't make them legal?" For the first time tonight, he wasn't just confessing, he was standing up. A soft chime rang from the laptop. "Upload complete." A wave of relief hit so fast and hard it nearly buckled me. "It's done," I whispered. Rachel let out a shaky breath. "What happens now?" I didn't have to answer. My phone vibrated. A message from the ADA inspector appeared on the screen. "Received. Reviewing now. Sit tight." This just escalated. Caleb stared at the text, horror and hope battling in his eyes. "She's going to lose it when she sees investigators pulling her logs." "Good," Mason said. "She earned it." But the night wasn't through with us yet. A sudden screech cut through the quiet, the sound of the rec center doors slamming open with violent force. A cluster of board members spilled into the courtyard, looking disoriented, muttering, terrified. Then she appeared, Vivian Markham. The tyrant in heels marched forward like a storm given human form. Her face was flushed with fury, expression twisted with the realization she no longer controlled the battlefield. The moment she spotted us at the tennis court, her eyes widened, not with rage, but panic. "Oh, she knows," Rachel whispered. Vivian's voice cracked across the court like a whip. "Step away from that computer." No one moved. The neighbors stood firm. Mason straightened, blocking the path to Rachel. Caleb held his ground beside me, fear replaced with a terrifying clarity. I closed the laptop and rose slowly, meeting her stare. "You should be more careful with your logs, Vivian." The officer of rules froze. Completely. She understood. She knew. And for the first time in her reign of terror, she looked genuinely afraid. Her world was collapsing, and she could feel each piece slipping through her fingers. Behind her, board members whispered among themselves, eyes darting, loyalty faltering. The shift had begun, and there was no going back. The board members didn't return inside. They scattered toward the main pavilion, the wide open-air structure used for town halls and summer concerts, its string lights glowing like a stage set for judgment. Residents began drifting in behind them, drawn by the noise, sensing something was about to snap. Word had already spread. Rachel's chair, the shooting, the inspector, the logs. Everyone gathered, everyone watched, everyone waited. Mason guided Rachel to the front row, while I stepped toward the center platform. Caleb lingered near the side steps, wringing his hands but refusing to leave. The entire community buzzed with anxious electricity. Then, Vivian Markham strode into the pavilion like a general preparing for war. The enforcer in crimson slammed a binder onto the podium so hard the mic screeched. "This meeting is now in order." Her voice cracked through the space, but the authority she relied on didn't land the same way it used to. Residents didn't shrink. They stood tall. Some crossed their arms. Some whispered openly. For the first time, the clipboard queen wasn't feared. She was cornered. Vivian forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. There have been serious disruptions tonight. False accusations, illegal actions, interference with HOA operations. I stepped forward before she could spin a single lie. Tell them why the ADA inspector contacted the board, I said, projecting my voice just enough. Her head snapped toward me. Sit down. No. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The officer of rules gripped the podium tighter. You are not recognized to speak. That's because recognition only works in a functioning HOA meeting, I replied, not an emergency cover-up. A few neighbors murmured agreement. Vivian raised her chin. You hacked our systems. I laughed once. I logged into public Wi-Fi using publicly accessible information. That's not hacking. But you know what is a crime? Falsifying timestamps, retaliation against disabled residents, destroying internal logs. The crowd stirred again. Vivian's face twitched. You have no proof? Caleb stepped onto the platform, and the pavilion fell silent. Vivian's expression cracked open. Fear, rage, disbelief. Get off the stage, she hissed, but he didn't. He looked out at the residents, voice trembling, but clear. I can't keep protecting her. I'm the treasurer. I saw everything. I helped her alter reports. But tonight I saw what she's willing to do to win. He gestured toward Rachel. She shot a disabled woman's wheelchair. That's not a violation. That's violence. Vivian lunged forward. Caleb, stop! No! He shouted, louder than we'd ever heard. You don't own us, Vivian. The crowd erupted. Cheers, gasps, murmurs of, finally! And we knew something was wrong. The tyrant in heels tried to regain control. This is outrageous. He's lying. He's unstable. But her board wasn't backing her anymore. 2 members stepped away from her side visibly. One shook her head in disgust. I held up my phone. ADA inspector has the discrepancies. She's reviewing them live. Vivian's face drained of color. Someone in the back yelled, You targeted her because she's disabled. Another shouted, You threatened half this neighborhood. A wave of voices rose, chaotic, angry, unified. Vivian slammed her hands on the podium. Quiet, all of you! Silence didn't come. In fact, the noise doubled. Residents were done. She looked around wildly, realizing her power had evaporated. I stepped beside the podium, voice steady. Vivian, the inspector is preparing emergency action. You should say something honest for once. Her breathing turned ragged. I did what I had to do. You people never follow the rules. I kept this neighborhood in order. And you did it by breaking the law, I said. The enforcer in crimson stared at me, something desperate flickering in her eyes. Fear mixed with disbelief that her downfall was being witnessed by everyone she once controlled. Your reign is over, Caleb said quietly behind her. It was the final blow. Vivian's legs buckled slightly, her grip on the podium failing as the crowd surged toward the stage. Not violently, but with the weight of truth, of unity, of fed-up neighbors reclaiming their rights. Lights buzzed overhead. Voices swelled. Her empire fell, and she knew exactly who had just dismantled it. When the pavilion erupted into chaos, it wasn't the kind fueled by fear. It was the surge of a neighborhood finally breaking free. Residents stepped forward, surrounding the platform not to threaten, but to witness the collapse of the power that had strangled them for years. Vivian Markham stood frozen at the podium, her expression crumbling as reality closed in. The clipboard queen, once smug, untouchable, now looked like someone standing in the wreckage of her own making. Then my phone vibrated again. A new message from the ADA inspector. Logs verified. Emergency order initiated. Remain in place. Agents en route. I lifted the screen so the nearest neighbors could see. Whispers spread like wildfire. She's finished, someone murmured. Vivian tried to speak, but her voice caught. She stepped back as board members edged away, refusing to shield her anymore. The tyrant in heels turned toward the pavilion exit, maybe planning to run, maybe planning to grab evidence she'd stashed somewhere else. But she didn't get far. A sharp voice echoed from the path. Vivian Markham, step forward, now. Not Mason, not a resident. 2 ADA enforcement officers strode into the pavilion, badges glinting under the overhead lights. Behind them, the city inspector followed with a tablet in hand, eyes fixed on Vivian like she'd already seen the entire pattern of deceit unfold. The crowd parted, forming a wide path. Vivian's breath hitched. You can't just storm into a private meeting. This is now a federal investigation, the inspector said firmly. The enforcer in crimson shook her head in disbelief. No, this is a misunderstanding. These residents are turning on me. Actually, the inspector cut in, tapping her tablet, your internal logs tell a very different story. Retaliation, fabricated evidence, false complaints, tampered timestamps, and tonight, an attack on a disabled resident's mobility device. Gasps swept through the pavilion. Vivian looked around desperately, waiting for someone, anyone, to defend her. No one did. She pointed at Caleb. He's lying. He's unstable. But Caleb stepped forward, shoulders squared, fear replaced with resolve. No, I enabled you for too long. I let you drag me into this. But everything I said is true. Rachel watched him with quiet gratitude. Vivian turned to me next, her eyes burning with something between rage and betrayal. You think you won? You ruined my systems, my authority, my work. I stepped closer. You ruined yourself. You did this. The officer of rules snapped. You're finished in this community. Good, a resident shouted from the back. We want him in this community. We don't want you. More voices joined in. Dozens, then more. The whole pavilion became a wall of collective truth. Vivian staggered. The inspector signaled the officers. Ms. Markham, you're being placed under administrative detainment pending formal charges. Hand over your credentials. When one officer reached for her, she jerked away, but not far. Her heel caught the edge of the podium step, and she stumbled, grabbing the railing to steady herself. The symbol of her control, the stage she'd ruled from, betrayed her as quickly as the people she once intimidated. They escorted her off the platform. Neighbors didn't cheer. They didn't need to. The silence was louder than applause, powerful, cleansing, final. Rachel reached for my hand, eyes watering as the tension she'd carried for weeks finally broke. Mason stood behind us, arms crossed, watching the officers lead Vivian down the steps. The tyrant in heels didn't fight anymore. She just shook, defeated, exposed, undone. As she disappeared beyond the pavilion lights, residents turned toward us. Some nodded, some whispered thank you, some simply looked relieved. The neighborhood felt lighter. I felt lighter. Caleb exhaled shakily. I can't believe it's over. It's not over, I said, squeezing Rachel's hand. It's beginning again, the right way. A resident spoke up from the crowd. What happens next? The board will be restructured, the inspector replied, and every case Vivian touched will be reopened for review. People murmured with relief. Rachel inhaled deeply. Maybe this place can actually become a home. Yeah, I said softly. Now it can. The night air felt different, less hostile, more hopeful. Lantern light flickered against smiling faces instead of fearful ones. We'd fought back, we'd won, and we'd changed something bigger than our own story. Before we left the pavilion, I looked at the camera hanging from the rafters, the security system Vivian once used to intimidate residents. Now it would record something new, a neighborhood rebuilt, a community reclaimed, and a reminder that silence never protects the vulnerable, only action does. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.